Thank you, Mark, for giving me the possibility to introduce this theme in your distinguished, vivid audience frame, and congratulations to that, what you achieved since the years. We speak about identity, and at first it was for me very touching, and I learned a lot about branding is understood the last days, because each of us had a different angle. And when I speak about identity at first, I think, for example, about the beautiful dress from our Ethiopian colleague here in the audience, because dress is one of, and language, are the most vivid parts of identity, who I am, where I come from. And here I would like to give a big hand to you, showing your identity to all of us, eventually encouraging us to consider more often, to think about the roots where we come from. Now my theme, branding thoughts, with respect to region, nation, it's very diverse, because I don't want to repeat the brilliant session of our Irish ambassador we 2 days ago had here in the CDI, ICD, and I just want to spin along his line a bit and identifying crowds, masses, countries, tribes was a major task throughout centuries. And we know there were shields where in the Middle Ages the troops tried to identify each other where they come from. It wound up becoming coat of arms, moved to symbols, came to logo, and nowadays to branding. By the way, do you know where the word branding has come from? Yes, you make a gesture. Yes, please. Yes, exactly. So this belongs to me. This is me. This is my belonging. And naturally, to own a nation doesn't fit in our times anymore. However, the overriding content still remains. The Irish ambassador, he said, brand seems too commercial. He would like to use the word enhancing. However, brand is tough, is easily understood, but we have to be aware what is meant. And I face a lot of competition worldwide, increasing competition of cities, nations, to brand their city, their nation, to become acknowledged, to raise attention. And some of the good or not so good examples, we heard in examples by the last speakers. Cool Britain, for example, we loved. We had fun with it because the Britons are not that cool, yeah? However, it is a challenge to pop out, to be acknowledged. And by the way, I realized you cannot change a brand if it's deep inserted in the roots, and there is no need to switch, to move it a little in another direction, fine. But to change, you all of a sudden skip your past. And if you skip your past, worse or wonderful, it's part of you. And so we have to live with it, but nobody prevents us from from being clever, being creative, to find ways to attract people to show towards us. Well, you can do it with the logo. You can do it with a fashion show, with an event, another event, an additional event, and all of a sudden we have worldwide thousands of events, and one is, let's say, only a few are popping out. And I realize the last 10 years people are curious to learn more about the neighbor. And governments realize it's time for open up beyond religious border or ethnic borders, because only together we become power. And this togetherness needs, to my belief, a structure. Without a structure, we dilute our power at the nation level, at the regional level. So we have to focus. And the best way to focus was, to me, to think about a roof and a stage where arts and culture can gather. If we want to be successful in being identified, we can learn what is there, what happened. And we realize that what happened in the field of sports, and we see in the field of sports competitions transmitted in television every day, hours. What makes the sport so important and so worldwide acknowledged? It is the link up, and finally the Olympic Games. And in ancient times, they had a recipe. They said, body and mind. That's what mattered. If one is lacking, we dilute the other, or we weaken the other. And this body and mind concept is just, let's say, a concept we adopted at the International Delphic Council after a long period of researches, and which leads finally to the founding 1994. I want to give you also some little hints why culture is that important, beside the hundreds of explanations you received, I hope. Diplomacy and economy is a very good tool of uniting countries. However, there are doors still closed, and you can only open doors with your arts and with your culture. As I realized in my last visits to Pyongyang and to Seoul, North Korea and South Korea. Under normal circumstances, you wouldn't be able to move from one to another, being invited by both embassies as guest of honor and sharing thoughts and what combines them, what unites them, not so much what divides them. And here, I would say the Delphic idea has its roots. Beside reviving, activating culture from the past for culture we create today to be memorized in 100 years as history. Because we should not forget what we are doing today is in 100 years our tradition or not recognized at all. Before I continue, I would like to introduce to you in a 3-minute clip an idea what the Delphic Games are all about. And the last games in Jeju, Korea, we had 54 nations, 1,400 participants, and they were really exciting. And this lady, for example, was also present, as many other people from these countries you can see downstairs in the exhibition we brought here as a very little part of what are the Delphic Games. If you want to see a little later an additional 7-minute summary from the founding to before the Delphic Games took place in Jeju, Korea last year, just let me know, we decide together. But now, please be so kind and help. And we realize that the Delphic Games, the gathering of arts and culture, becomes more and more important because it is that what attracts, what excites, what is something to share. Let's say the International Delphic Council as such is structured a little similar to the Olympic Games. An International Delphic Council, National Delphic Councils, and we are founded, as I said, 1994, and our strongest partner became, beside the Ministry of Culture, within the nations and countries, the Ministry of Tourism. They realized if they showcase their brilliance, their cultural heritage, it's the best way to attract and to invite others. It's, to me, not so much the spa resorts and everything else. This is not so much identity to me. Identity to me is when you go visit a country and you find the original there. That's why you go there. When I was invited by the Chinese government, for example, they brought me to Xi'an, to the army, you know, the pottery army, and then they invited me in the evening to a performance of a Chinese princess performance. And I said, I Ping, is this original? And she said, well, why you ask? I said, it seems to be very Western. They said, the Americans like it so much. And I said, please don't delude the power you have. Don't allow things to happen just to please someone. Because an audience, by instinct, knows, is this meant real or is it just for show? You know if the instrument is played professional, you sense it. If you don't know, you sense, or is it just, let's say, a tourism fake? And so identity is very, very important to us. And in branding, to use this term, we have to start in thinking what is meant with branding. We use the word very often, and we very often remain oral, besides others starting to write books at government level. And here, I received a book several months ago, Our Bahrain, the Country Brand Book. Who are we? Who want we to become? What makes our essence? What is the power we definitely have? And what is just a nice adaptation of the west, east, north, or south? So it's worthwhile to dig into what makes us unique beside the touristic office. What makes us unique? How we brand ourselves. And this is for Bahrain and even the younger nations, or let's say the former East European countries, which are striving now for how I show my diversity, even if I come out of a country which was united before then. And it is worthwhile to dig in this subject Otherwise, we wind up with a sales promotion of a product which can't be sold, at least not continuously, or as we nowadays say, sustainable. This is also, for example, in Abu Dhabi the case. Numbers, and if you dig into it, you see this was assisted, for example, by authorities from New Zealand, Ireland, and a third nation. I forgot it. However, it shows if the basic, pardon? Singapore, yes, thank you. And if this assistance is good, but if the basics are not coming from the origin, you run into the danger to collect nice features, but the audience, your citizens, your people, will not reflect their visions, their dreams, their identity. And so they just say, oh, nice. And that's it. For example, you can create the most beautiful theater, but if you don't show the right pieces, you will have no local audience. Then it's like this, that the Westerners, so to speak, being accidentally on vacation, having fun, but the audience themselves comes from, let's say, is missing from the origin place and from the original country. So it is a very sensitive matter to strive for branding programs. And as we saw in the Western thinking, I had to learn is affecting my thinking naturally as well as coming from the West, coming from Germany and having traveled around the world. And I just know that it's not enough to think according our terms. And this is the chance of yours, because you are not afraid going beyond, crossing borders. That's brilliant, and that's the so-called brilliant idea of Mark gathering you here to give you an approach from the outside to where I come from, and to connect in this searching who we are, where you come from. One thing is important, and that's why the Delphic Games are more and more successful worldwide, and why countries are bidding for the Delphic Games. Because it does not exclude anybody. Everybody is involved as long as he cares for culture, for his, her culture. There is no first, second, third world. There is only one world. And if you have the same eye height by being aware what's going on, you are on the winning trail. And as you know, the Western art and culture is dominating very often the globe in the instruments, in its music, because they are the best promoters. And sometimes in other continents, such as Asia or Africa, the authorities have difficulties to promote their own heritage because the Western style is so overwhelming, starting from dresses, starting languages. For example, if you have a nation with various languages, you finally decide to adopt English as the so-called communicating language. And most important is to take care of the other languages and dialects as well, because this is identity. This is identity. That's why the International Delphic Council developed 6 art categories, because we had the challenge to find out how to unite the wishes, the dreams, the ethnic activities of the various countries throughout the world. And so we came up at first with the acoustic arts. This includes music and instruments in single or in group. Second, the performing arts. This is dance, theater, circus. The third, lingual arts, poetry, literature, storytelling. The fourth is the visual art, handicraft, architecture, so paintings, sculpturing. The fifth is social arts, media, communication, pedagogic, didactic. And the sixth is ecological arts, landscape and city design, preserving monuments and cultural heritage. These are the 6 categories which will be performed either or in competition, presentation, or exhibition. Because as you are aware, you have to, if you give, for example, awards, we have 3 types of awards. That's the medal, gold, silver, bronze, for those which can be compared. And we know we have in music and dance, we have competitions, and there are fields you can, specialists, jurors, can really decide this is better than that. The second is the Lyra Award. This award is given to those, and it's a little copy of the Oscar. It's a smaller part of a larger piece. So, for example, the best junior, the best dresses, the best choreograph in a larger piece. And last but not least, we have the laurel. And the laurel is, nowadays, you say, wow. And the wow award, let's say, uncomparable, exciting. Let's say it's the top, it hits your heart at once, it touches you. This is the laurel. So there are, as you might recognize, some similarities between Olympia and Delphi. Delphi has, let's say, the possibility going beyond the medals. And Olympia, for example, also to give a little difference, Olympia has as element, you know, the element which, let's say, is prominent for Olympia is the torch, yes, the fire. For us, the Delphic Games, it's the water. And we just looked back in our history, because when in ancient times the participants came to the sanctuary of Delphi, they purified at the Castalian spring. And even nowadays, till today, many religious groups or rituals are based on water, or water is an element. And so the water was chosen as our identification. And for example, the last Delphic Games in Jeju, we had a ceremony in Delphi. A dancer group from Korea came, fetched the water in Delphi in a ceremony, took it from a Greek amphor into a Korean bucket, as they in Korea carried water throughout hundreds of years, flew it back to Korea, and in Korea they selected the spring water in ceremonies, and at the opening ceremony in Jeju, they brought the 2 waters together. And each city, it was a competition, only 6 cities were permitted. They were excited, the television was there, and it was a promotion, a countdown for the Delphic Games. are desperate for spiritual rituals which make sense, not artificial. But if it makes sense, we all know about the importance of water. And so it was warmly received and internationally transmitted at that time. And so I believe, I tell you this because the various countries, cities, they have their traditions as well. And it's sometimes worthwhile to dig into this history. What makes us different? Because there are differences. Sometimes you are even surprised, and sometimes ask even the outsiders. When I lived in Greece, for example, people ask me, how dare you as a German reinvent the Delphic games? I said, it has to be that way. They kept quiet and became angry and said, why? I said, it's normal. If you're surrounded by beauty, if you're surrounded day to day with that what you have, you're sometimes blind for that what you have. An outsider can help you to make you aware what precious values are there. But it's important that these outsiders love the city, the region, the country. It's not a business decision. It is a matter of sensitivity. It's a matter of the feeling for what matters to the other. What we want to tell our grandchildren, sometimes not born yet. What is us? What makes us? And this is preserving, identifying at first, preserving what we have at second, and third, in helping to find new forms without diluting the other. Something new is wonderful, but don't dilute your tradition, because otherwise you lose that what makes you what you are. And because, as already said by other speakers, if the identity, the striving for identity is not rooted in your city, in your country, you will lose, you will fail. It has to be rooted because people are too smart not to recognize. For example, I hope that I don't annoy some of you, but Be Berlin is to me a nonsense promotion. Because it doesn't show anything about what's Berlin. It's just a campaigning, nothing more. No brand, no, that's us. I just would like to ask you at the end of the speech, and before you raise your questions, hopefully, if you identified that what makes you unique, look for the best you can get to put it in the website. Because nowadays it's an instrument of remarkable power. And do just search for the best photos. Recognize it's worthwhile to animate, to activate the vision you have. And last but not least, if you have something in mind, you dream upon, you would love to achieve, your youngsters, stick to it. And if people say, oh, do you know how many millions? Do you think you are crazy? Do you think you become Rockefeller? Let them smile. Just continue what you're doing. Learn, make your idea, your vision more visible, and see the critics of others as an invitation to become better, but never, ever give up. Because otherwise the Delphic games wouldn't be here, wouldn't be alive, it wouldn't be able to spread throughout. Thank you.